Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. Hope you're having a great day as we continue to celebrate all the amazing people across this state who are working so hard in the trenches to make this such a great place to live, work, and play. You know, at the beginning of this year, there's a lot of discussion on this show about resolutions, and we will continue probably for the next 2 or 3 weeks to talk about resolutions. People have so many different ones. For me, it's about family and faith and living in the moment and my health. And while I try to do this every day, and as I've said many times on the show, I live every day like that. The beginning of the year is an opportunity for me to think about, okay, what can I do, kind of step up my efforts? And to me, it's about reflection. It's about maybe sharpening my saw just a little bit, but just trying to get a little bit better at lots of things. So I set some very specific goals because I'm a goal-oriented guy. But as I mentioned on my show more than once, my son Justin really encouraged me to capture from all of these. I've had over 1,400 conversations on this show. Think about that for a minute. Over the past 5 years, we're celebrating literally the 5th year anniversary. And over those 5 years, I've taken copious notes from every single conversation. I have it all organized and categorized. And if I were to begin to capture some of the essence of this show, what would it look like? And last week I shared an excerpt from a chapter that I posted at the Ricky Matthews Show about stepping into the arena, and I built off of what Roosevelt said about the man in the arena is the one that matters. And as volunteers, we all have to be willing to get into the arena. I thought about several other chapters, but then I thought, okay, if I were ending a book about this show, it would be about legacy, about leaving a legacy and why that's so important for us to think about. Not necessarily for ourselves, but because of the lasting effect of what it is we're doing in the community. And so I would write a chapter about leaving a legacy. And I wanted to share with you just a couple of paragraphs from what I wrote. And for regular listeners, you'll know why this inspired me so much because of my conversations with a number of people, but not the least of which is the late George Schlogel. But if I were writing a book about leaving a legacy and the inspiration that comes from this show, here's kind of what it would sound like. You can read the whole chapter at the Ricky Matthews Show Facebook page, but here's what I said. As I reflect on the many conversations I've had on the Ricky Matthews Show, so much stands out from more than 1,400 conversations. There's a lot to learn about what it takes to build a strong, resilient Mississippi. One name consistently resonates, the late George Schlogel. I had the opportunity to work with George on various efforts in the community, from rebuilding the Ship Island Lighthouse to rebuilding coastal Mississippi after Hurricane Katrina. His initial appearance on this show was January the 20th, 2020, and it marked the beginning of a series of discussions that profoundly influenced me and my listeners. As a former chairman of the board for Hancock Bank and former mayor of Gulfport, George was not just a prominent figure in coastal Mississippi. He was a leader whose values and vision for the future will forever echo in the hearts of those who knew him. Toward the end of one of the shows with George, and I've shared this many times incidentally, I asked him, "What is your legacy? How do you want to be remembered?" And without hesitation, he replied, "I don't want to be remembered." His humility was palpable, but I pressed him further, saying, "You are going to be remembered. You might as well influence that." George continued, "I don't want to be remembered as a personality. I want the things we got done to continue so that other people can have the same opportunity I had as a youngster selling vegetables in West Gulfport." This sentiment encapsulates George's essence, a man committed to the betterment of others, believing firmly that our future lies in the hands of young people. He went on to say, if you can have an environment where they can flourish, not necessarily monetarily, but flourish in enjoying this paradise, and if I can have a little piece of that, that's what I want. George's desire to create opportunities for future generations is a powerful reminder of the long-term impact of our service. As volunteers and leaders in the community, we must think about the immediate results. We must go beyond the immediate results and focus on what will endure after we are gone. And I go on from there talking about the importance of mentoring the next generation and whatever. And I wanted to add a section, and I'll share this with you now. But in my conversations on the show, I had the honor of spending time with my friend Dorothy Roberts, discussing the legacy of her mother, the late Lucy Marion Roberts. Lucy Marion was not only a dear friend, but also a mentor who had a profound impact on my life. We spent hours together talking about life, leadership, and community. Her kindness, positivity, and unwavering faith made her one of the most remarkable women I have ever known. She was a trailblazer, becoming the first African-American woman to lead the Mississippi Board of Education. She possessed a spirit that permeated everyone around her. She loved to sing, often lifting the spirits of those who needed encouragement. Dorothy shared a powerful sentiment from her mother. Life provides losses and heartbreak for us all, but the greatest tragedy is to have the experience and miss the meaning. Lucy Marion was determined to find meaning in her experiences, and through her wisdom, she taught us all to cherish the gifts of life that life's offer, especially during difficult times. And I went on to say her legacy lives on through her daughters, Dorothy and Robin Roberts, co-anchor of ABC's Good Morning America, as well as her beloved community, and that she pursued her entrepreneurial spirit and her willingness to connect with the community in very profound ways. I talked about Roland's influence on me. I have a section that I shared about Boyce Holloman and what he meant to this community. I talk about Jerry St. Pé and his contributions, and I'll go on from there. But leaving a legacy is an important thing to consider. And it's interesting. There are living legends like Roland Weeks and Jerry St. Pé, and there are those whose lives inspired us who are no longer with us, like Boyce Holloman and Lucy Marion Roberts and George Schlegel, and so many others like them. But we're building off of these, what I call stalwart leaders, inspiration to continue to build a great community. And I hope this show, in some small way, is capturing the essence of that. And I'm thrilled to have been here for 5 years as we continue to celebrate so many people who are working in the trenches to make this a great place to live, work, and play. So I may share one or two other chapters before this is over with, but I wanted to share that with you. Okay, now we're going to shift gears. I'm really thrilled to have my friend Ralph Humphreys back. And speaking of volunteer spirit, he certainly is providing that after 13 years. After being retired for 13 years from the Federal Aviation Administration, he's involved in a number of important efforts involving fishing and enjoying the natural resources of coastal Mississippi. And I'm thrilled to have him back on the show. Ralph, how you doing, my friend?
Doing great, Ricky. It's good to be here. Thank you.
So, as you heard me talk about legacy, man, we're fortunate to have so many great leaders in this community. Some of them still with us, some of them no longer with us, but they have left terrific legacies. And it challenges us, doesn't it, to want to step it up and work harder to leave our own legacies.
Absolutely. In my own small way, I'm doing what I think is important work for not just for me, but obviously for the entire coast of Mississippi.
Now, look, we're going to get into some of the volunteer work that you're involved with. But before we do it, let's take a step back for just a second and remind people about your career. You had a good, wonderful, long career, and you were able to retire young, which has given you the opportunity to be able to give back in the community the way that you did. But tell us about your time at the FAA.
Well, not long after high school, I decided that I wanted to be an air traffic controller, and the easiest way in my mind was to join the service and be an air traffic controller. So I did it for 4 years in the Navy. I got out late 79 and applied with the FAA. It took 2 years to get hired. I was living in Destin, Florida at the time. The Air Traffic Controllers Union went on strike in 1981, and President Reagan gave them 48 hours to come back to work. They chose not to, and I was hired just a couple of weeks later. And I started off at Dallas, Texas at Love Field, and from there went to Mobile, Alabama. Spent a few years there. That's where I met Robin. We got married. From there, we went down to Miami, spent 6.5 years in Miami. I wanted to get back up into the northern Gulf Coast, and I was looking for supervisor positions along the northern Gulf of Mexico, there, through Florida and Alabama, and I was selected for a position at Gulfport. Robin and I thought we'd be here for 3 years. That was in January of 1992 that we got here, and we were fortunate. We had right as casinos were getting here, and land was cheap. We bought a lot in a neat little neighborhood here on the Schuylkill River and built our home. And the next thing you know, we fell in love with Biloxi. Our neighborhood was full of like-minded people. And,
so, Ralph, let's do this. We'll pick it up from right there. We're just out of this. We're at the end of this segment, but we're visiting with Ralph Humphreys, who has been a long-time contributor and leader for the Mississippi Gulf Coast Fishing Banks Incorporated. We'll talk more about that here in just a second. He's got lots of observations, but we'll continue to have our conversation with Ralph after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. 5 years. Think about it. 5 years. Man, does time fly. It's amazing to me. And as long as I continue to feel like this show is going to make a difference, I'm going to stay in this chair here in the studio at my house doing this show. It's been a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to give back to the community. The one thing I missed about being a CEO of a digital news and newspaper company was not the P&L side, that's for sure, but for sure the ability to get in the community and work hard and to make a contribution. And this show's, really fulfilled that part of what I was missing. And I've been thrilled that SuperTalk Mississippi Media brought me into the fold and has enabled me the opportunity to have this show. So I really appreciate you listening, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. We're visiting with Ralph Humphreys. At the beginning of the show, we just talked a little bit about leaving a legacy, and and of course last week in a show we talked about volunteerism with my friend Jamie Bates and how important it is to have volunteers in the community. And it's interesting that, Ralph Humphreys, who's retired from the FAA 13 years ago, but he's been involved in the Mississippi Gulf Fishing Banks Incorporated since, I think, back in 2001. So that's a long time. He's been a big-time volunteer. But when we went back to when we went to break, we were talking about he and his wife Robin decided to settle here over in a cute, wonderful community full of like-minded people over on the Schuylkill River, having to dodge a flood from time to time. But you really have found your home there, haven't you, Ralph?
I really have. Again, the neighborhood was full of people our own age, with kids our own age, our son's age, and they all grew up together. And we really fell in love with Biloxi. I had thought when I got here that I wanted to move back to Northwest Florida. My mom and dad still lived in Destin at the time, and the amount of growth I saw, uncontrolled growth taking place all along the panhandle of Florida and into South Alabama, we realized that right here in Biloxi, we've got everything that we like, with nobody to compete for it. And the growth that we've witnessed has really been well structured, I thought. It hasn't been out of control. So anyways, we decided to stay here. As you mentioned, the Gulf Fishing Banks, I joined in 2001 just as a member, primarily just so I could find out where the artificial reefs were. There wasn't a great deal of advertisement. We were just getting out of Loran, I guess, and starting to get on the GPS. So it was somewhat selfish, I guess, that I joined the group. But that's one of those organizations where the more you show up, the more they expect you to participate. And before I knew it, I was on the board of directors. And then shortly after Hurricane Katrina, I became president, and I put everything I could into the position. I didn't sell it short. I went all out every time I got an opportunity. When something needed to be done and no one put their hand up, I would take on the role and get it done. I've been the president now since around 2007, I guess. And through that, I've been volunteering on other things as well. I've spent time with the Gulf Council. And in fact, I'm on a position right now. In fact, we meet in the morning in New Orleans. It's a recreational anglers initiative where we're trying to get a better link between the anglers and the Gulf Council, they've got a bad rap, and deservedly so quite often. I will say that since I've been following the Gulf Council real close, the membership has changed completely, and it's made up of different minded people these days, and one of those different minds is trying to bridge this divide between the anglers and the council, and try to make everybody understand what it is they're doing and why they're doing it.
Yeah, well, in fact, we'll come back to that. For people who've not heard of the Gulf of Mexico Fishery Management Council, they played a really, really important role, and we'll speak to some of that here in just a second. But let's come back to the fishing banks, the Mississippi Gulf Fishing Banks Incorporated. As I'm a fisherman, so I spend a lot of time offshore. I know private numbers, I know public numbers. I've had, over the many years, many years, more than I can remember, I've had the opportunity to enjoy them. As I look up now, I'm looking at, spear fishing paraphernalia and every kind of rod and reel you can possibly imagine. We call this room where I have my office, or excuse me, my studio set up, we call it the fishing closet. And it's definitely a testament to our love for fishing. But a lot of people don't realize that off our coast, some of the best fishing we have are actually at these artificial reefs. And when Hurricane Katrina hit, it really decimated. Think about these extraordinarily high waves and the way it pushed things around. I mean, we can't overstate how significant the damage to the artificial reef locations off the coast of Mississippi were, can we?
No. In fact, over half of the artificial reefs were gone. What happens during those huge wave events, and not just Katrina, but any time there's a huge wave event, that wave motion causes that material on the bottom to sway back and forth, and it scours into the bottom and literally will disappear. Not everybody realizes, but our coast is made up of a mud bottom. There is no natural live bottom. There's no limestone or corals, any of that type of living structure. The only thing that's holding reef fish out there is the artificial stuff that we place in the water. But it's the mud is not a good bottom. It's not a good substrate to lay up artificial reef on, because eventually it will scour into the bottom.
And it certainly did that in a big way after Hurricane Katrina. And, one of the things and I've had long conversations with Joe Spraggins and others from the Bureau of Marine Resources, Department of Marine Resources, that, we want more artificial reefs. One of the things I said to him was, when I bought my boat from over in Gus Shores, the guy who installed my electronics, he kind of took a liking to us. He said, "I'm going to do you a favor." I said, "What you going to do?" He said, "I'm going to put in all my private numbers into your GPS." I said, "You're kidding me." He said, "You're over in Mississippi. I don't suspect you're going to come over here too often, but what you're going to have in your GPS is going to be all of the private numbers that I have and all of the public numbers that I have." And man, dude, you know this. It's a lot. I mean, what Alabama has done off their coast is unbelievable. Then you go to Mississippi, and we've done better. But the number of numbers relative to Alabama, when you look at you go, okay, I'm gonna toggle out so that I can see the waters off Alabama and Florida and Mississippi and Louisiana, and compare the numbers. Holy mackerel, man, do we have work to do. You're vastly aware of that, aren't you?
Absolutely. And it all boils down to money. The DMR does what they can, and they support us financially. We wouldn't be able to do anything without their support. But it's a limited resource that they're dealing with. They have so much money that they can allocate towards artificial reefs, but they also have to do payroll and all the other things that, law enforcement. They have to do a lot of things with a small amount of money that comes from Jackson. The way I see it, Alabama puts a lot more emphasis. The legislature puts a lot more emphasis on building up that artificial reef structure, because they know the what it means to the local economy is for money. They're going to get back tenfold what they spend, and they realize that. We don't have the angler base that they do. Just looking at the captains for hire, the charter for hire captains, we have a fraction of what they have over there.
Yeah,
we don't do in a whole year what they do in a weekend.
Yeah. Hey, I happen to be quite familiar with it just because not only was I president of Alabama Media Group when I was in Alabama, but I was publisher of the Mobile newspaper. I also led for Governor Riley. I was chairman of the Coastal Recovery Commission after the oil spill. And we had over 1,000 people involved in that effort. And one of the metrics I like to quote is this, that one quarter of the entire state's tourism revenue, one quarter, comes from Baldwin County in 3 months. Think about that for a minute. Think about that's economic impact. So when we were talking about, the tar balls rolling up on the beach and all of that. In fact, we used to have our annual family reunions there. They're now in Destin to accommodate Ann's brother, Mark, who comes up from Orlando, Tampa area. But we used to do them there, and we did them that year. And the beaches were basically off limits, and the smell of oil was everywhere. President Obama actually came through there while we were there. But the impact was very significant. And while the charter boat fishing community had always been important to the state, it was during that time, during the oil spill time, that we came to really understand, wow, I mean, it is a big, big deal. And so, again, I think they understood it was important before the spill, but then after the spill, all it did was double down. The state doubled down on the fishing community in a really, really big way. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Ralph Humphreys. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're visiting with Ralph Humphreys, who has been involved in the Fishing Banks organization here in coastal Mississippi for a number of years. 2001, so he's been involved for a long time. He retired from the FAA 13 years ago, and he's found a way to find fulfillment in his life by volunteering. And again, we have so many people who are on this show who fit that description. When we went to break, though, we're just talking about. We were kind of concentrating for a second on the Alabama charter fishing industry and how they've really, as a state, rallied around that, and how important, especially Baldwin County, is to the state of Alabama. The coast of Mississippi is important to the rest of the state, and I love having charter boat captains on this show. I can't have enough of them on this show to talk about how great the fishing is in coastal Mississippi. Man, we're so lucky to live here. We probably could do more as a state to really zero in on the charter boat community and the contribution they're making back to the state, because this whole notion of what we provide people who live here in terms of recreation and what do we provide for our visitors, we probably don't tap into that enough, do we?
No, we don't. We need to make a bigger effort, I think.
So coming back, one of the other things that Joe Spraggin said we had to always be aware of is balancing the creation of new reefs with shrimpers, and that part of our economy, and that's to be understood for sure. But we can still do it, though, can't we?
Yeah, and in fact, we have a limited number of areas out there that we can deploy artificial reefs in. And the shrimpers are keenly aware of where they're located. Now, one thing that the DMR, to their credit, is undertaking right now is to expand the artificial reef areas, both to I believe it's to the west and to the south, or maybe it's the west, and it's somewhere around FH13, just south of Pascagoula. They're expanding that area down there. They're going through all the necessary steps, the environmental impacts, and they're going to basically double that artificial reef zone. And there's not been a great deal of pushback from the shrimpers. I mean, it is in their historic shrimping grounds, but apparently they've gotten on board. There's not been enough opposition voice to stop the process.
Yeah, for people who are watching on the Facebook and YouTube and SuperTalk TV, I'm actually looking at the map of this is Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, and it shows very broadly where each of the major artificial reef areas are. So people who have not been there before, you're not going to a single point on a GPS. Once you get to that area, there are several different things. There could be sunken boats. There could be rubble. There's so many different forms. In fact, I'll get you to tell me sort of where we're headed toward in terms of what makes the ideal reef. But once you get there, and once I get there, what we end up doing, we'll mark lots of stuff. You know, we're with some of the depth finders we have today, you can see so much, and I'll mark stuff that I don't have on my GPS. So as soon as I see whatever that is on the bottom with fish on it, bingo, I hit it, and it's forever in my GPS, and so or my depth finder. So when I go there, I can see. I mean, lots of data about how I performed the last time I was there, et cetera. So we're able to go to, this is where we were catching fish last time, but we got so many, if it's a windy day, especially as we're floating around, we may discover even new stuff, but it's a pretty large area. We like FH7 because you get a little bit further out, you don't have as much competition, but FH13, that's an area you see shrimp boats and other stuff. It's just great to hear they're not pushing back, but we've got something to work with out there, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We have not put a lot down in FH7 since the hurricane. It is a long ways out, and with the price of fuel the way it is, most of our input from the recreational guys has been, hey, we need stuff closer. Even the charter boat captains like stuff closer because they can run a trip quicker and at less expense to them. So most of the stuff has been going in 1, 2, and 13 for snapper. Our organization has the permits for the artificial reef construction. We were building reefs before the Department of Marine Resources was even on the radar yet. And they've allowed us to continue to maintain those permits as a nonprofit organization. It's a symbiotic relationship, right? We can receive materials and the organization that donate can get a tax break because they got them. They went to us. Then we turn around and work with the DMR to get the resource, the funds to actually get it out of the water. Just recently, we've sank quite a few things. It's been all over the news about the world's largest cockroach that went out there on the tugboat. We did several things last year. But you talk about construction, there's 3 things that those permits allow us to put down. One is materials of opportunity, which generally speaking is culverts, rubble, but they're specific about how it looks. It can't be wood, can't be fiberglass. It's got to be specific types of rubble. But that's a material of opportunity. A material of design are the constructed domes, the fish pyramids, the domes that go out, and then derelict vessels, which what that tugboat was. The tugboat was a derelict vessel. We just happened to strap a 150-foot tall cockroach to the back of it.
that actually, as you said, it drew a lot of attention. That went down. Did it go down at FH13?
It did. The back end of FH13, not far from the 2 pogey boats that we put down last year.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm still looking at the map. You're looking at FH1, FH2. When I look at those on the map, here's what comes to mind. And I got years and years and years of fishing these areas. The fishing at FH1 and FH2 has consistently got better and better and better. Like, for example, you couldn't go there and catch big, I'm talking about monster red snapper years ago. You couldn't. Now you can. So you would have to go to 108 block or something like that off, way off our shore in order to get the big guys. But now, man, it's been managed so well for the most part that the big fish are catchable in really shallow water. So you round that eastern end of Horn Island, and you can, if you look, you can start to see the boats out there sitting on FH1, FH2. And man, oh man, fishing can be awesome out there.
Yes, it can. I knew charter boat captains a couple of years ago that were running 2 trips a day to FH1. Go out, catch a limit in the morning, come back to Point Cadet, unload their passengers, load up a group, and go back in the afternoon, all in FH1, catching legal size snapper. And a lot of that is management. The biggest thing that the Gulf Council has done since their creation was to turn over control of the red snapper industry or fishery to the 5 Gulf states. It's made a huge difference, big impact.
Because until that happened, Ralph, it was unresolvable, the conflict.
Yes. And the straw that broke the camel's back was when the year that they gave us a 3-day season. And the Gulf states pushed back hard and said, no, that's not reasonable at all. We're going to fish as much as we want within state waters. And that was the turning point. But there was even more to it than that. The state waters for Texas and Florida go out to 9 miles. Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama only went out 3 miles. And those 3 states requested that, and I guess it was to the legislature in government in Washington, that, hey, give us out to 9 miles like the other 2 Gulf states. They said no. So those 3 Gulf states says, we don't care. We're going to go out to 9 miles anyways and fish for red snapper. And they did. And it was right after that we started seeing a change in the Gulf Council attitude. And eventually, through a lot of hard work by people like our local DMR, a lot of hard work internally to make it manageable. We've got control. I say control. We're allowed to manage our resource now. They give us the resource. They tell us how much fish we can catch, and then internally we manage that allotment.
So we learned through that process because I had the opportunity to be publisher here, then publisher in Mobile, then publisher in New Orleans. And so I got to watch it from those perspectives, also being fishermen who fishes off Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana as well. And there were all kinds of problems. One obviously is the shortened season. And, obviously the battles between Alabama and the feds were epic on so many different fronts. And certainly it was for the others as well. But I think more so in Alabama, we learned a lot. But as each Gulf state fought the federal government as it relates to this, I mean, all kinds of fallacies started to come out. When we come back on the other side, we'll talk about some of that. It was, how they collect data and lots of things like that. And then we'll talk about what's new these days when we continue our conversation with Ralph Humphreys. We'll see you after this. Well, welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio. We're enjoying a conversation with Ralph Humphreys, who has been involved in Mississippi Gulf Fishing Banks Incorporated for a long time as a volunteer. And we were chatting a little bit about sort of the epic battles that took place between the Gulf states and the federal government as it relates to specifically red snapper and how we go about red snapper. For Ralph, for example, one of the things that we wrote about extensively when I was in Alabama, we did a series about this, about how commercial licenses were even issued. And then they were subleased or sold to others. And it was just all messed up. And then on top of that, the shortened days, as we mentioned, and then, of course, how they collect data. They were talking about specific things that they were observing, and the experience of fishermen at oil rigs or at fishing reefs were completely different from what they were hearing. But there were just tons of disconnects, weren't there?
Yeah, 2 of those topics are extremely hot button. The commercial fisheries, they're looking at, the Gulf Council right now is looking at scrapping all of those permits and starting over. The last Gulf Council meeting this past, I believe it was in October at the Beau Rivage, they talked about, it was one of the casinos. They talked about it a lot, and the commercial guys were desperate to protect their turf and not change anything. There are a lot of people out there that are going, hey, you guys had a free ride for a long time. It's time to look at it again. So that's under consideration right now.
Say, Ralph, I know you're going to say the other thing, but real quick, just a comment. What was interesting to me about that is some of the people who hold those leases have never wet a hook. No. That's what's amazing.
No. They're the so-called, what do they call them, snapper wards? They sell their their shares and or rent the shares. And yeah, they haven't been on the water. Their boat's not been on the water 20 years. And the other one is that data collection. The data collection, and that we're hammering that pretty hard right now in that recreational workshop. That the data collection is desperate to be revamped and looked at. Mississippi does an extremely good job of collecting data between the tails and scales that they started several years ago, and now the recreational offshore landing permit that they started last year, so they can actually count the number of people that are fishing for snapper, not just saltwater fishermen being counted as a snapper fisherman. We're doing a heck of a job here in Mississippi, and we've got really, really accurate numbers. I know that for a fact. But the people that are in charge don't care. The data collection is a definite sore spot with all 5 Gulf states.
And you've actually served on the data collection advisory panel now for 2 years.
Yeah, I was on it for a couple of years. I've been off it for a couple of years now too. And most of the data collection information that we were working on really was for commercial fishermen. I didn't see much in the way of recreational fishing collection going on, so I chose not to rejoin.
Yeah, isn't it interesting, Ralph, how something so important can be so out of kilter?
Yeah.
Because, here's the thought. Throughout my career as a fisherman, as a recreational fisherman, there has been an ongoing battle, conflict, you name it however you want to, between commercial fishermen and recreational fishermen. You name the species, I'll talk to you about the battle. You would think that they would be more inclined to figure out, how do we make that less of a battle? How do we make that fairer? How do we reduce the conflict? And you would think that data would be the thing, because I've always believed, of course, I'm a former CEO and said this a lot, that what gets measured gets done. But if you can get everybody to agree on the data sets, then you might be able to actually align around the decisions. But they couldn't ever get anybody aligned around the data sets. So it's almost like they were building in conflict.
Yeah. So the data collection for the commercial fishermen is pretty accurate. They count and weigh every single fish. We don't. The recreational side doesn't, and that is where the uncertainty comes in, because we're not sure, and the government has to guess. And literally, that's what they do, is guess. I think, from a personal standpoint, the conflict between commercial and recreational is not what it was several years ago. Now that the states are given an allotment to manage, I think most of the recreational fishermen feel like they've got enough fish to catch. What is bad is when that allotment gets changed based on bad data, which is what happened to us 2 years ago, and it was reinforced this past fishing season. Our allotment, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but let's just say roughly 155,000 pounds was our allotment going into it. We came out with 65,000 pounds. They cut us significantly. They cut Alabama as well. Their allotment is much larger than ours, so their cut was much larger than ours as well. What I found to be extremely interesting was the amount of fish that was cut from Alabama and Mississippi combined was the amount that Florida was increased.
So you can't do stuff.
Almost to the pound.
You can't do stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hey, Ralph, we're out of time, but well, this has been a fun show for people who don't understand how it works. I'm sure you were interested in hearing this, and fishermen, you really get it. It's great that we're making progress. We're going to talk more about that progress in upcoming shows with you. I look forward to having you back, my friend.
Okay, thanks, Rick. It's good to see you.
You bet. This has been Ralph Humphreys. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.